I trusted him because he was my boss, because he smiled when others didn't, because he said he would protect my career. I didn't know that trust would cost me my peace, my voice, and almost my future. My name is Alicia Monroe, and this is the story I never planned to tell. I live in Columbus, Ohio, a city that looks calm on the surface, tree-lined streets, glass office buildings, and coffee shops filled with people pretending they're not tired. I used to be one of them. For 6 years, I worked at Crestline Solutions, a mid-sized corporate consulting firm downtown. The kind of place that prided itself on words like professionalism, integrity, and family culture. Those words were framed on the lobby walls, printed in company emails, and repeated during staff meetings like scripture. I believed every one of them, especially because of Mark Reynolds. Mark was my boss. He was in his early 40s, tall, clean-cut, always dressed in tailored suits that looked like they belonged on magazine covers. He spoke calmly, confidently. When he entered the room, people listened. When he spoke, they nodded. Everyone respected Mark, including me. When I first joined Crestline, I was 27, freshly promoted from an entry-level role at another firm. I was eager, ambitious, and proud of how far I'd come on my own. No connections, no shortcuts, just long nights, skipped weekends, and a belief that hard work would always be rewarded. Mark noticed me early. "You're sharp, Alicia," he told me during my first performance review. "You asked the right questions." That one sentence hooked me. From then on, he became my mentor, or at least that's what I thought. He gave me more responsibilities, trusted me with client presentations, pulled me into meetings other associates didn't get invited to. When he spoke about my work, it was always positive. "She's reliable," he'd say. "I trust her judgment." Those words meant everything to me. At Crestline, trust was currency, and Mark was giving me plenty of it. Or so it seemed. At first, nothing felt wrong. When he asked me to stay late to help finalize reports, I didn't hesitate. When he texted after hours about work issues, I responded immediately. When he suggested we grab coffee to talk strategy, I thought it was an opportunity. That's what ambitious employees do, right? I told myself I was lucky. I ignored the small discomforts. The way his compliments slowly shifted from my work to my appearance. The way he stood just a little too close during conversations. The way he'd lower his voice when it was just the two of us. "Don't misunderstand," he'd say with a soft smile. "I just want to see you succeed." And I believed him, because he was my boss, because everyone trusted him, because I had no reason not to. At least not yet. That was before the meetings started happening behind closed doors. Before the tone changed. Before I realized trust in the wrong hands becomes a weapon. And once you hand it over, it's very hard to take back. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the moment when things began to change. It wasn't one big incident. It was a pattern. At first, Mark's attention felt flattering, encouraging even. He asked for my opinion more often. He looped me into emails meant for senior staff. He praised me during meetings. "You see things others miss," he'd say, glancing at me across the conference table. People noticed. Some smiled. Some didn't. I ignored the looks. I told myself I was earning my place. Then came the private meetings. "Let's talk in my office," Mark would say casually after team briefings. At Crestline, closed-door meetings weren't unusual. Managers did them all the time. Still, I felt a small tightening in my chest every time the door clicked shut behind me. Mark would sit back in his chair, hands folded, eyes steady on mine. "You're doing great work, Alicia," he'd say, "but I want more for you. More." That word hung in the air like a promise. "You have leadership potential," he continued. I don't say that lightly. I nodded, heart racing. I wanted the future he was describing. I'd worked too hard not to. "You just need someone in your corner," he said. "Someone who understands how this company really works." I didn't realize then that he was positioning himself as the gatekeeper. The conversations slowly drifted. He asked about my personal life. "Are you seeing anyone? Do you live alone? Do you ever get lonely with all these late nights?" I laughed it off, uncomfortable but unsure why. He smiled like I was overthinking it. "I'm just making conversation," he said. "Relax." So I did. Or at least I tried to. The late nights increased. Deadlines that had to be met. Reports that couldn't wait until morning. He'd sit across from me in empty conference rooms, city lights glowing through the windows, the office quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Once, when I stood to leave, he said, "You don't have to rush out every time." His tone wasn't angry. It was amusing. "I'm just tired," I replied. He looked at me for a long second. Hard work requires sacrifice. I didn't know then that he wasn't talking about work. Things escalated in small, confusing ways. A hand on my shoulder that stayed too long. A comment about how polished I looked in a dress. A joke that crossed a line, followed by, "I'm kidding, you're too sensitive." Each time, I told myself I was imagining it. Because accusing your boss, especially one as respected as Mark, felt unthinkable. One afternoon, I overheard two coworkers whispering in the break room. "She's clearly his favorite," one said. "Yeah, must be nice," the other replied. I stood frozen, coffee cup trembling in my hand. That's when the isolation began. People pulled back. Invitations stopped. Conversations went quietly when I walked in. And Mark? He noticed. "They're jealous," he told me later. "Don't let it get to you." I wanted to believe him. The first time I tried to set a boundary, my voice shook. "Mark," I said during one of our late meetings, "some of these conversations make me uncomfortable." His expression changed instantly. Not angry. Cold. "Careful, Alicia," he said quietly. "You don't want to misunderstand professional mentorship." My stomach dropped. "I didn't mean I started." "I've gone out of my way for you," he interrupted. "Don't make this awkward." The room felt smaller. I apologized. I hated myself for it, but I apologized. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage, engine off, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Something wasn't right, but admitting that meant admitting I'd been wrong about him. And worse, it meant admitting I might be alone. So, I did what so many women do when trust starts to crack. I stayed silent. And silence, I would learn, has consequences. I wish I could say there was a clear moment when everything shattered. A single sentence, a single touch, a single unmistakable line crossed. But the truth is worse. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already standing on the other side of it. It happened during a client project in Cleveland. Crestline had sent a small team to support a manufacturing firm going through a restructuring. Mark insisted I come along. "You're ready for exposure like this," he said. "This is how careers are built." I felt proud, nervous, grateful. We stayed at the same hotel. Company policy allowed it. Separate rooms, of course. Everything was professional. On paper. The first 2 days were exhausting, but productive. Long meetings, tight deadlines, late dinners with clients. On the third night, Mark knocked on my hotel room door. "I need your input on tomorrow's presentation," he said through the door. "This won't take long." I hesitated. It was late, past 10, but this was work. I opened the door. He sat at the small desk by the window, scrolling through slides on his laptop while I stood near the bed, arms folded. "Come sit," he said casually. I did. We reviewed charts, numbers, and strategy. Everything felt normal, familiar. Then his tone changed. "You know," he said, not looking at the screen anymore, "I've been watching how people respond to you." My shoulders stiffened. "You command attention," he continued. "That's rare." "Thank you," I replied, forcing a smile. He leaned back in his chair. "Confidence looks good on you." The silence stretched. Something in my chest tightened. I closed my notebook. "I think we're done here." He didn't move. "You don't have to be nervous," he said. "I'm on your side." That's when it happened. He reached out and brushed his hand against my knee. Just for a second. Just long enough. My body reacted before my mind did. I stood up so fast as the chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Mark," I said, my voice barely steady. "That's not okay." He looked surprised. Offended. "I think you're misreading things," he said calmly. "Sit down." "I need you to leave," I said. The room felt too small. The air is too thick. He stood slowly, eyes locked on mine. "Be careful how you frame this," he said. "Accusations can get messy." My heart pounded. "I didn't accuse you of anything," I said. "Good," he replied, opening the door. "Let's keep it that way." And then he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying every second over and over again. Did I imagine it? Did I encourage it? Was I overreacting? That's what power does. It makes you doubt yourself. The next morning, Mark acted like nothing happened. Professional, polite, distant. During the presentation, he praised my work in front of the client. Excellent analysis, he said. Everyone nodded. No one knew what had happened behind that hotel door. And that was the worst part. Back in Columbus, things shifted fast. Mark stopped including me in key emails. He reassigned projects without explanation. He corrected me publicly in meetings. When I asked if something was wrong, he smiled. You seem distracted lately, he said. Maybe you're not ready for this level of responsibility. I felt sick. This was the price. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, comments, changes in assignments. It felt paranoid, but necessary. I didn't trust him anymore. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because men like Mark don't like losing control. They like silence. They like compliance. And I had given him neither. After Cleveland, work no longer felt like work. It felt like surveillance. Every email I send, I reread 3 times. Every meeting, I measure my words carefully. I started arriving early and leaving late, not because I had more to do, but because I didn't want to give Mark any excuse to say I wasn't committed. The office in downtown Columbus hadn't changed, but I had. The glass walls felt closer. The hallways felt longer. The silence felt louder. Mark barely spoke to me unless it was necessary. When he did, it was clipped, formal, cold, but the damage was already done. One Monday morning, I opened my inbox to find an email copy to the entire team. Alicia will no longer be leading the Kensington account. The decision aligns with departmental restructuring. Restructuring. No conversation. No warning. Just humiliation, public and sharp. I felt my face burn as co-workers avoided my eyes. A few offered sympathetic smiles. Most said nothing. That's how isolation works. Quietly. Efficiently. I finally went to Human Resources. Her name was Denise Walker, mid-50s, calm voice, always perfectly dressed. Her office smelled like lavender and professionalism. I just need advice, I said, sitting across from her desk. Nothing formal. She smiled warmly. Of course. HR is here to support employees. Those words felt safe. I told her everything, carefully. The comments. The hotel room. The retaliation. She nodded slowly, hands folded. That sounds stressful, she said. But are you certain his actions weren't misunderstood? My stomach dropped. I know what I felt, I said. Feelings are important, she replied gently. But intent is difficult to prove. She asked if I had witnesses. I didn't. She asked if I had messages. I didn't. She sighed. I suggest focusing on your work, she said. Escalating this could affect your reputation. There it was. The warning disguised as advice. After that meeting, things got worse. Mark called me into his office. I heard you had questions for HR, he said calmly. My heart stopped. I hadn't mentioned his name. I just wanted guidance, I said. He smiled thinly. Next time, come to me first. That's when I knew. HR hadn't protected me. They had reported me. The retaliation escalated. Performance reviews turned critical. Deadlines became impossible. Mistakes I didn't make were suddenly mine. You're not meeting expectations, Mark told me during a review. My hand shook. I was exceeding expectations 6 months ago, I said. Things change, he replied. So do perceptions. I stopped sleeping. Every morning, my chest tightened before I even reached the office. I lost weight. I stopped calling friends. I didn't want to explain what I couldn't fully understand myself. I felt ashamed. Ashamed for trusting him. Ashamed for speaking up. Ashamed for staying silent too long. That's the cruelty of it. You're punished no matter what you do. One evening, as I sat alone at my desk, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have kept this professional. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, heart racing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was from. That night, driving home along I-70, tears blurred the road ahead of me. I realized something painful and clear. This wasn't about one incident anymore. This was about power, and I was losing, unless I stopped being afraid. There's a point where fear stops protecting you. It just traps you. I reached that point on a Thursday morning, sitting in my car in the Crestline parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to move. My badge lay on the passenger seat like a weight, I couldn't lift. I thought about turning the car around, calling in sick, quitting without saying a word. That's what they expect you to do. Disappear quietly. Make it easy. Something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. That day, I started documenting everything for real. Not just notes in my phone, not just dates scribbled in a notebook. Evidence. I printed emails, saved calendar invites, screenshotted performance reviews before and after Cleveland, downloaded company policies on harassment and retaliation. I worked late, not because Mark asked me to, but because I needed time no one was watching. The more I reviewed, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. This was punishment. I reached out to Rachel Kim, a former co-worker who had left Crestline the year before. We met at a coffee shop in Short North, far from the office. She listened quietly as I told her everything. When I finished, she didn't look surprised. "He did the same thing to me," she said softly. My heart dropped. "Why didn't you report it?" I asked. She gave a sad smile. "I did. HR told me I was misinterpreting professional boundaries." My hand started shaking. "You're not crazy, Alicia," she said. "And you're not the first." That was the moment my shame turned into anger. The next week, Mark put me on a performance improvement plan. A PIP, corporate code for "we're pushing you out." He slid the document across the table, expression calm. "This is to help you succeed," he said. I read the goals, vague, impossible, subjective. "You're setting me up to fail," I said quietly. He leaned back. "That's your interpretation." I signed it, but this time I kept a copy. I contacted an employment attorney in Cincinnati. Her name was Linda Harris, sharp-eyed, direct, no nonsense. She reviewed my documents in silence. "This is retaliation," she said finally. "And HR knows it. What do I do?" I asked. "You keep documenting," she replied. "And you don't quit." For the first time in months, I felt grounded. I wasn't powerless. I had options. Mark sensed a shift. "You seem different," he said one afternoon, watching me closely. "I'm focused," I replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said, "because things are about to get very serious." He was right, just not in the way he thought. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, with papers spread out in front of me. I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who believed hard work was enough, the one who trusted authority, the one who thought silence was safety. I wasn't her anymore. And for the first time since Cleveland, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready that I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. By the time HR called me in for a formal follow-up, my file was already thick. Too thick for someone who had never been written up before Cleveland. Denise Walker greeted me with the same calm smile as always. Lavender, soft lighting, neutral walls, safety theater. "We've received some concerns about your performance and conduct," she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. Conduct. That word hit harder than I expected. "I'd like to formally report retaliation," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "An inappropriate behavior from my manager." She nodded slowly, like she was humoring a child. "We take all allegations seriously," she said, "but we also have to consider the full context." I slid my folder across the desk. Emails, timelines, comparative reviews, policy violations highlighted in yellow. She didn't touch it. Instead, she opened her folder. Inside were notes I had never seen before. "She's emotional. Difficulty accepting feedback. Boundary issues." My stomach dropped. "These aren't true," I said. "These are documented observations," Denise replied calmly. "By whom?" "By Mark. By HR. By the system that was supposed to protect me." The meeting ended with a warning. "Continuing to pursue this could negatively impact your standing here," Denise said gently. "Sometimes it's better to move on." Move on. That's what they tell you when they want you to go. 2 days later, my access to certain systems was revoked temporarily. Projects were reassigned. Coworkers stopped responding to my messages. I was still employed, but I was erased. Mark passed my desk without looking at me. He didn't need to. HR had done the dirty work. The breaking point came when I received an email marked final notice. Failure to meet PP objectives would result in termination. No appeal process listed. No meeting scheduled. Just an ending. I forwarded it to Linda immediately. Her response came fast. They're trying to force your hand, she wrote. Do not resign. We escalate now. We filed a formal complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. When Crestline received notice, the tone changed overnight. HR suddenly wanted meetings. Mark suddenly wanted to clear the air. Executives who had never spoken to me before wanted explanations. Too late. The internal investigation was slow and painful. I was questioned repeatedly. My credibility was tested. My memory was dissected. Mark denied everything. HR supported him until something unexpected happened. Rachel came forward. Then another woman. Then another. Different timelines. Same patterns. Same manager. Same HR responses. The truth finally had witnesses. The day Mark was placed on administrative leave, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the email confirmation. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, because winning doesn't erase what it costs you to survive. When Mark was placed on administrative leave, the office didn't celebrate. It went quiet. Not the respectful kind of quiet. The uncomfortable kind. People avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I walked past. Doors closed softly but deliberately. It was like everyone was afraid the truth might be contagious. I was no longer invisible. Now I was that woman. HR called it a transition period. To me, it felt like limbo. I was allowed to work, but not fully. Allowed to speak, but carefully. Allowed to exist, but without belonging. Denise Walker no longer smiled. Her emails were short, formal, defensive. We ask that you refrain from discussing the investigation with colleagues, she wrote, as if I hadn't already been silenced long enough. The stress caught up with me fast. I started waking up at 3 a.m., heart racing for no reason I could explain. Some mornings, my hands shook so badly I spilled coffee down my blouse before leaving the apartment. I stopped wearing dresses. I stuck to dark blazers, flat shoes, no makeup. I didn't want to be noticed for anything except my work. Even that felt like a risk. Outside the office, my world shrank. Friends didn't know what to say. Family worried, but didn't fully understand. Dating felt impossible. How do you explain that trusting the wrong person nearly broke you? So I stopped trying. 3 months later, HR concluded the internal investigation. Their findings were careful, strategic. Inappropriate conduct could not be conclusively substantiated, the report said. However, leadership style concerns have been identified. Mark resigned quietly 2 weeks after that. No announcement, no apology, no accountability, just an empty office and a LinkedIn update about new opportunities. I stayed, not because it was easy, but because leaving felt like letting them rewrite the story. Crestline offered me a lateral transfer to a different department under a different manager. They framed it as support. I knew better. It was containment. Still, I accepted. I needed stability. I needed space to breathe. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Rachel again, this time in a parking lot outside a grocery store. You look lighter, she said. I thought about it. I think I am, I replied. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. The last email I ever received from HR came on a Friday afternoon. Please confirm that all matters related to your complaint have been resolved. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed my laptop. Some things don't resolve neatly. They just change you. That night, sitting alone in my apartment in Columbus, I reflected on everything I had lost and everything I'd gained. I lost innocence. I lost trust. I lost the version of myself who believed systems were fair. But I gained something stronger. Clarity. I understand now that power doesn't always look loud or cruel. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it mentors. Sometimes it says, trust me. And that's when you have to be most careful. I didn't walk away from Crestline victorious. I walked away awake. Months after Mark resigned, life slowly began to feel quieter. Not easier, just steadier. The constant tension in my chest loosened. My sleep improved. My thoughts stopped racing every time my phone buzzed with a work email. The danger had passed, but the lesson stayed. I transferred teams and started working under a woman named Karen Mitchell, a director based in Cincinnati who led with transparency instead of fear. She never raised her voice, never crossed boundaries, never made me feel like my career depended on her mood. For the first time in a long while, I exhaled at work. But healing didn't happen overnight. Some days, I still flinched when a male executive closed his office door. Some days, I still questioned my instincts. Some days, I still wondered if I could have stopped it sooner. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end when the situation ends. It rewires how you see the world. One evening, I sat in my Columbus apartment, scrolling through old photos on my phone, smiling at work events, laughing at team dinners, standing beside Mark in a group photo, unaware of what was coming. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt grief. Grief for the version of myself who trusted without fear. Grief for the belief that doing the right thing always protected you. Grief for the silence I carried alone for too long. And then, something unexpected. Pride. Because I spoke up, even when my voice shook, even when I was doubted, even when the system tried to bury the truth quietly. I spoke up anyway. I learned that HR isn't there to protect people. It's there to protect institutions. I learned that power doesn't always announce itself with force. It often disguises itself as opportunity. And I learned that silence is never neutral. It always sides with the powerful. The most painful lesson? Trust should never be automatic. Not because someone is older. Not because someone is respected. Not because someone signed your paycheck. Trust should be earned and protected, especially when power is involved. Today, when I mentor younger women at work, I tell them the truth. Document everything. Listen to your discomfort. And never confuse access with safety. I don't scare them. I prepare them. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Mark. Not with fear, but with clarity. He didn't destroy me. He exposed the cracks in a system that relies on silence to survive. And I refuse to be silent ever again. If you're listening to this, and something feels familiar, if your stomach tightens at certain meetings, if your instincts keep whispering, this isn't right, listen to me. You're not weak for trusting. You're not wrong for speaking up. And you are not alone, even when it feels that way. I trusted him because he was my boss. I was so wrong, but trusting myself afterward, that saved me. Thank you for listening.